Hello, and welcome to the first episode of Deeper Than Blue's podcast series on systems modernisation and automation. My name's Stephen Birch. I'm the marketing manager at Deeper Than Blue. We're a digital transformation agency based in Sheffield, and our work includes systems integration, app development and modernisation, cloud migration and AI. We've been working with IBM since we were founded in 2013 and have team members that have even longer relationships with IBM. Today I'm joined by Chris Booker, Sales and Marketing Director at Deeper Than Blue, co-founder of the business, and Doug Coombs, Business Development Lead for IBM's automation brand. Good afternoon, gents.
Hello.
Good afternoon.
So I'm looking forward to a very interesting discussion today on the modernisation imperative. So let's get started. If we strip away the buzzwords for a moment, what does systems modernisation actually mean for organisations today? Doug, maybe I can come to you first.
I think from an IT perspective, it's about adopting and changing to new architectures. If you think of things in layers, and I'd like to think of things in layers, it simplifies things out, right? You have hardware at the bottom and maybe an application right at the top. There's multiple layers that people need to consider as part of how they provide applications to their business and how they run their IT in their business. And each of those layers can be modernized. I think what's important is that you need to think about the different factors and balance different factors when you're doing that. So you've got business objectives, you've got a cost, you've got performance, you've got organizational type stuff and cultural stuff that you need to take into account. So it's not just an IT problem that we're talking about here. You need to think about the consequences of modernizing your architectures and the way that you deliver applications and those applications themselves.
Okay. Chris, from a Deeper Than Blue perspective.
Yeah, okay. So I think building on what Doug talked about, it's around the business imperative as to why an organisation might feel a need to modernise. Some of the applications and systems out there go back 30, 40 years and less in terms of the Java world, probably around 20 odd years. And obviously they were built with the best intentions, the best needs and requirements at the time, but things progress and evolve, and organisations equally feel the need that they need to as well. So, as we all know, technology runs at a very fast pace, if nothing more, quicker now than ever with the evolution of generative AI. But organisations need to think about how and where they run workloads, how secure those applications and workloads are, and are they the most cost-effective ways to run those applications today? And I think they're more commercial considerations that an organisation needs to think about. And then on top of that, it's maintaining those applications and systems, because people are coming up for retirement. If they were writing mainframe COBOL code 30, 40 years ago, they're no doubt on the precipice of retirement, if I dare phrase it like that. And so organisations need to build some resilience and think about the future. And so I think there are there's a human side to it as much as there is a commercial side and a technical side.
Okay. So you talk a bit about sort of legacy systems there. So starting with you, Chris, maybe you could say a few words on what the most common pain points are that companies hit when relying on IBM or legacy systems, the classic systems that we all know and love.
Yeah, I think that organisations have got a myriad of applications and systems, and it's broader than just IBM. I mentioned Java applications, but they can also be .NET applications, PHP applications that today could all be considered monolithic by nature because of how they were developed and built. And some of the pain points people experience are, one, the resource availability in the market for certain skills. I think two is the knowledge may or may not be in the business that wrote those applications in the past. So that's going back to the human angle. Three is that they could have become expensive in terms of they are built as a monolith, therefore the amount of compute and resource that they consume is pretty fixed and may not vary dependent on demand and being able to, dare I say, scale up and scale down during busy and less busy periods. So I think they're the areas that I would look at. And then the final one I would maybe comment on where pain can come is where systems become unsupported from a technology perspective, and that's maybe the vendor's support being past the end of life on a particular product or piece of technology. And then that takes us back into the vulnerability discussion where organizations are really hostage to fortune in terms of if that application breaks, can they find somebody to fix it? Can they patch it? Sometimes that's a yes. More often that's a no, and that can be mission critical in terms of that application and effectively cause significant business problems.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Doug, what's your take on this from an IBM perspective?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with what Chris has just gone through. I think I'd characterize it, and it's just playing off what Chris has said into three different perspectives. The first one for me is maintenance. That's an extreme pain point that we see many times. People often say that it takes too long, it's too complicated to go and keep their systems up to date. So the longer that you leave it, the longer the versions that you have, the older the architectures that you have, the more cost and time that it takes to be able to even upgrade those applications, let alone modernize those applications. I think Chris touched on the security angle, and I think increasingly you become vulnerable to security threats because that older software is not putting the patching and security requirements in place that leaves you open to attack, basically. And the support angle Chris has already covered. I think the last area that I would speak about is stifling innovation. So because you're spending so much time looking after an application, maintaining that application, keeping it alive for the business, it means that you have an opportunity cost. And that opportunity cost is I can't do the smart things that I want to do. I can't compete with the next guy that's talking to his customers in a very different way. So that lack of ability to provide innovation, I think, is really critical and really stopping people from moving forward and gaining advantage. Okay, and I think that's the real killer at the end of the day. The other things important, of course they are, right? And when a CFO focuses on cost, then guess what? That's where they go first of all. But I think if you go talk to the COO and you go talk to the guys that are running the business, they want to be doing new stuff. They want to be interacting in new ways, selling product in different ways. Those old architectures and applications are really holding them back from doing that.
Okay, that's interesting. Chris, you want to come in?
I was just going to add that something in the region of 70% of IT budgets are spent keeping the lights on, opposed to, as Doug talked about, innovating. We can debate the percentage, but it's significant out of an annual IT CIO's budget, the amount that they have to commit to, as Doug says, keeping the lights on versus innovating within the business.
So we may have answered this next question in the previous section, but the question was going to be, why has modernisation become such a pressing business issue now? Is it purely about cloud adoption, or are there deeper forces at play? Or is it more about agility, security, and perhaps, as you mentioned, Doug, innovation?
Yeah, you probably expect to know what my answer is going to be, right? I don't think it is purely about cloud adoption. And my P45 moment, if you like, for the day, I guess, is I think at one point in time, cloud was the thing, right? It was the hype. It was the thing that was going to save lots of people. It seemed to be the best approach to be able to solve a problem or provide a cheaper way of providing compute. Maybe actually help people innovate, right? Because guess what? Cloud can be elastic. I can bring it up and pull it down when I want to. I think the reality has sort of hit home, and I think evidence shows that people need to choose the right place for their workload. And there's more compelling reasons of why you want to go and modernize your applications. Yes, innovation. Yes, lessen the security risk on your worlds, for example. Just Chris talked about it earlier. simply getting the skills to be able to do what you want. Very hard, very expensive, the older the applications are, right? So, if I want to go and modernize, I got a different set of skills I need to go and invest in, right? So I think the drivers are wide and varied and not just about this thing called cloud adoption today. Because I'm seeing people coming back to us going, actually, I want to move workload back from the cloud. I moved it out there, but actually it's not the right place. It's not doing the job I want. Maybe it's too expensive, as I thought it wouldn't be. I want to move it back again. So I don't think that's the driver today. There's just a myriad of drivers. Predominantly it comes back to how successful is my business, is the truth of it, right? And can I find the right ways to then deliver that business?
Okay, Chris, at Deeper Than Blue, we talk about the sort of mixing private cloud, public cloud, hybrid cloud, on-premise systems. What would you say that the reasons for people moving towards modernisation are at the moment?
Well, I think I'd certainly amplify what Doug's said earlier in terms of run the workload in the right place at the right time. And I think that's evidenced by a recent IDC report where they're seeing high evidence of, whilst a lot of workloads move to the cloud, workloads are now moving back from the cloud, and they may be moving to a mixture of on-premise and private data centers, because people have learned about what works well in the cloud and what doesn't work quite as well. So I think that's a maturity that we're seeing there in terms of people's experiences. And by the way, there's still lots of workloads moving in this direction to the cloud. That's still continuing. As Doug said, it allows flexibility. We don't have to wait for hardware to be delivered. It's OPEX versus CAPEX, all these kind of things. But, we know now that nearly 30% of cloud spend is wasted. So it's about optimizing things and running workloads in the right place. We're seeing a mixture. The technologies that we use and that we're referring to here on this event today can pretty much be run anywhere. In terms of, they can be run at the edge of the network, they can be run in data centers and on-premise as much as they can be run on cloud. So that's not really a restriction or a consideration moving forward for organizations. It's really about the right place, the right technologies you want to invest in. And I think, going back to Doug's point earlier, it's about agility. So back to innovation. How fast can we talk about delivering software product, delivering new features, new functions. We understand that organizations aren't software development companies, but their teams are effectively developing software product that is used by their customers, their employees, their stakeholders. And that's what we're referring to here. That's speed of change, being able to make incremental improvements within days, within weeks, but certainly not within what people have typically done in months or a couple of releases a year. Those days are long gone.
Doug, maybe I can come to you for this next question. So some businesses might worry more about the disruption of modernisation more than the pain of staying put. Again, we've talked a little bit about some of the pain points, but what would you say to the CIOs or the CTOs who might still be sitting on the fence?
First of all, I would say not all applications need to be modernised. I think you need to prioritise. Okay, you need to work with the business and decide which ones are appropriate to go prioritise. I might choose to rehost or repackage some applications, but I might choose to rewrite other applications. I might remove applications out of my world and actually adopt the SaaS-based provision of an application because it's more appropriate, right? So I think there's choices to be made. First of all, it looks like a big, horrible problem, but actually when you bring it down, you can start to plan for manageable chunks. I think the second thing is probably a bit more brutal is that the longer you wait, the more it's going to cost you increase the risk that you're gonna suffer. So skills are going to get more expensive, and the speed at which you can do it actually is going to slow down because it's going to get more complicated because you don't have the people to go do it, and it just becomes more complicated. I think the last thing I would say to the CIO is that there's lots of help out there. And I think the skill set in companies like DeeperThanBlue, for example, who have practices to be able to understand and help organizations understand what their environment is like, and then put some prioritization around that is good. The software tooling that companies like IBM are building are starting to help, accelerate the ability to go modernize your applications. So I think too often companies try and do it internally themselves and get stuck or get mired in the analysis of what's going on. And I think DeeperThanBlue can start to open up that for them and give them some prioritization and some quick wins. And that's what everybody's after at the end of the day, right? So yeah, those are the three things I would say to CIOs.
Okay, great. Chris, you're in daily contact with CTOs, CIOs. What do you say to them?
Don't wait. But I'm with Doug in that not everything needs to be done tomorrow, and so to prioritise. But yeah, this will get more costly. You're building more technical debt the longer you leave it, and so for those that are top of the list, get on the journey. Organisations like ourselves can assist you and expedite that journey as well as do skills transfer. So we can modernise your team's skills, we can mentor those individuals and make sure that they're comfortable post-project in terms of running and maintaining those applications as well as enhancing them.
Okay, so let's move on to some of the technology enablers. IBM's technologies have evolved enormously from WebSphere and MQ to Cloud Paks, OpenShift, and AI-driven automation. How do these platforms, these modern platforms, help organizations move forward without throwing everything away? Chris, do you want to start on that?
So one of the things that we've seen over, I would say, the last 5 to 6 years is IBM has progressed their software considerably in terms of modernisation. As most people would be familiar with, a lot of software tended to be run virtualized as the last stage of modernisation on VMware or hypervisor type technology. Whereas where IBM has taken that technology today is to containerize it and move it into a more modern platform where people can scale up and scale down their resource requirements using technologies like containers and Kubernetes. And they've developed things called Cloud Paks, and those can run on premise, but they can also run on the hyperscalers, so Microsoft Azure, on Google Cloud, and Amazon AWS. And they also run on OpenShift, so customers can decide how and where they want to run these technologies in the future. But most of IBM's portfolio now has been moved across to containers, which means that the speed of development, the speed of release of application can be far faster through DevOps pipelines. But equally, the cost of running and managing IBM software can be considerably reduced.
Doug, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, just a couple of things. I think IBM have developed the ability to give customers choice, is the truth of it. If your workload is demanding a different type of architecture, a more responsive type architecture, the ability to go be flex and change, I think, moving to that container type paradigm, whether that's adopting that through a cloud type provider or whether that's bringing that architecture inside of your house, you can do that. If you want to move to more traditional style of software into SaaS-based software, again, you can do that. And in large part, I can lift and shift that logic that you've built and relied on for many, many years and just adopt the new architectures to be able to run these applications. I think so. IBM, ultimately have given you choices of where you want to go run that, right? So if you do have a cloud first strategy, you can actually go and adopt that and have confidence that IBM will support you. But if I wanted to keep some workload because I'm in a regulated industry, for example, like banking or, for example, pharmaceutical, I might actually run some of that workload back inside of my firewall. So you can also do that. I think the other thing IBM has done is augmented that software with capabilities that allow people to understand how do you move, how do you modernize. Okay, some technologies that we've got that help you understand code better. If I've got code that I don't have the skills inside my organization of what does it mean, how does it function, why did I write that line of code, I can start to use assistants to be able to unlock that secret and give me access into why it does what it does, and how I'll be able to change it. Right? How can I break that monolithic apart, or how do I create a new, adopt a new framework because the old one is going out of support? So we're bringing tooling to help people move into those modern worlds, as well as supporting them or supporting the workload in the place that they want. I think that's what IBM has done, whilst ensuring we've got compatibility, right? You mentioned MQ. MQ's been around for 30 years. It runs, predominantly the world's financial transactions, on that platform with the biggest providers of banking in the world. That isn't going away. We modernize that so they can adopt new architectures. They can reduce the cost of running that platform. They can speed up the support of that platform, ensure they don't have the risks that are involved in that we've talked about before. But we still provide that functionality, and we will continue to do so because it's an important part of the architectures and the way people run their businesses today.
We're seeing a big shift towards automation and, like you say, infrastructure as code. Tools like Terraform and Vault from HashiCorp are gaining traction. How do you see those fitting alongside the IBM modernization stack?
Mm-hmm. So if you stand back a little bit and you look at what companies are trying to achieve in terms of delivering their applications to the business, again, maybe oversimplifying it, but they do three things in essence. They build, they deploy, they manage. That's what they do, okay? In that deploy phase, I need technologies that allow me to bring up infrastructure and then configure that infrastructure and ensure that the passwords and the architectures are secure, right? I'm talking therefore about things like Terraform, infrastructure as a code, and I'm talking about things like secrets management and privilege management and identity management type technologies, right? That is infrastructure automation. It fits nicely into that deploy phase, if you like, if I think of build, deploy, manage. And, let's be honest, it's never as simple as that. And guess what? You have this lovely marketing phrase called shift left, where those technologies are starting to impact how do I go develop applications. I don't just develop it, pass it over the fence, and then someone deploys it and then passes over the fence and someone manages it. I'm using technologies across that life cycle to be able to help me ensure that I deliver applications better and smarter and faster and more appropriate, right? And then I manage them appropriately. So there's a mixture inside of that build, deploy, manage phase, but certainly infrastructure automation is a key pivotal technology to help you modernize your application landscape. No doubt about it.
Yeah, it's back to the agility piece, isn't it, and speed of innovation, in that we're using these technologies and have been for the last 6 years. Our developers and engineers, cloud engineers, if you like, really buy into what they can achieve with these. And I think where we've taken these to customers, they've seen the acceleration in terms of projects and more reliable code being delivered, it being tested earlier in a life cycle of a project, and effectively delivering a better quality of product, which are largely the principles of what Doug touched on in terms of shifting left. That's the reason that you bring these things in. Yes, it's another component, another piece of technology, but it helps you accelerate. It helps you do more releases per week, per month, per year.
Absolutely.
Okay. Has anyone got any real life examples of where a legacy IBM estate has been successfully modernized? So what the triggers were, what the hurdles were, and what maybe some measurable gains were achieved?
I'm always super cautious about talking about percentages and actual gains, because sometimes you worry about the credibility. But we are seeing some astonishing results from people adopting some of these new technologies. Things like, for example, reducing the time to deploy code by 70%. For example, doing resource utilization, increasing that utilization by 50%, or, for example, decreasing administration costs by 40%. Simply by adopting some of these modern architectures and modernizing those applications, you're starting to achieve some of those things. And by the way, we talked about earlier that there's help. How do I modernize? There's tooling being now available to be able to help you understand and prioritize what do I modernize. And some of the organizations that we're working with are seeing a reduction of 70% in the original effort that they planned out to modernize that application. So they're going 70% faster than they thought they would have done. So on ibm.com/case studies, then there's certainly a number of different actual, documented case studies that you could go have a read of and have a look at how they approached it, what the challenge was, what the outcome was for those sorts of things. So forgive the high level numbers, if you like, but they're probably the easiest way to articulate some of the benefits that people are seeing today.
Fabulous.
I think from our perspective, Stephen, where we've seen the acceleration I referred to in e-commerce, we've seen it help retailers accelerate how quickly they bring new capabilities to market. We've also seen organizations that have developed apps. So those apps have been developed and deployed into the iOS marketplaces and Android marketplaces effectively. And they've gone from doing maybe 3 releases a year to almost weekly releases. Obviously, they take time off for Christmas and public holidays, but on the whole, their acceleration is incredible in terms of what they're delivering to their customers. And in these particular cases, some of them are bespoke applications. It's not something they can buy off the shelf. So they're thinking about how they enhance that proposition to their clients and their customers. I think the last area is probably in logistics, where we've seen, using this technology to stand up environments on the cloud has certainly helped an organization where they went through a divestment. And so part of the business was split off, and that part of the business was the business that was running some of the IT systems and applications on their behalf. And through using this technology, we could easily provision within one of the hyperscalers at one of the clouds and get the application back up and running for them.
So we've had some examples there of businesses who have been through the modernisation journey. What tends to surprise organisations the most once they've been through a modernisation journey, whether that's positive or negative?
I think in the last few meetings that I've been to with some pretty big organizations in the UK, and they're struggling with how do they start to understand their environments, how they prioritize their environments. We have tooling that be able to help them do that. And when we show them that tooling, it's like, wow, I didn't think I could use something that would give me that level of insight, right? We start to unravel what are the architects they're using, what applications they're using, where the frameworks that are going out of support, where are they being used across their application landscape. And not only that, you press a button and it says, we would recommend that you change this framework for this one here. And this is the code level detail of how you go about doing that. Do you want me to do this for you on these 3 applications? I think that's what surprises a lot of people, because their perception is modernization is hard. And yet there are tools out there that enable us to accelerate that really quickly. So I imagine Chris has got some better answers than me, because that's a very technical, specific product answer. But I have been surprised that has been such an eye opener for people, I think.
I think, at the risk of repeating myself, it's back to that speed of change where we talked about the innovation. That's where the big surprise comes, in terms of how quickly people get into that cadence of moving faster than what they did. And we talked earlier about the shifting left, how quickly they start to adopt that philosophy, if you like. Now, that might only apply to one project, one work stream, but it certainly is an aha moment in terms of them thinking, how do I start to use this more across my business? Why is it just this one project where we now have that acceleration? And how do I take this to the rest of the business and to the rest of the projects and start to use this to gain better value across the business? So I think that's the learning that I would say we've seen. And then I think through the HashiCorp technologies, so Terraform and Vault, that ability to stand up environments and tear down environments really, really quickly that are blueprints signed off and are reusable assets is absolutely fundamental versus somebody just going and configuring something at the leisure that hasn't necessarily been assessed, hasn't necessarily been through security and vulnerability scanning and testing. And it effectively gives organizations the ability to build these environments very, very quickly. But knowing that they're secure environments and that they are a blueprint that they can use time and time again.
So we've spoken mostly about technology, but we've also covered the human side a bit. So modernisation isn't just about software; it's about people, processes, culture. So how do teams need to change to get real value from the new platforms and automation that's available? And maybe let's have a think about how Deeper Than Blue and IBM can help clients upskill, retrain their teams.
Well, as you rightly point out, software development is about people ultimately, and bringing skills. And as long as I've been involved with IT, there's been constant change in terms of evolution of technology, and people have had to develop and maintain and enhance their skills during that window, if you like, over the last 20 years. And I'm sure that happened prior to my involvement in IT as well. So I think it's important that, organizations think about what are the right technologies that people should learn and think about how they put them through a learning and development path. There are a number of courses and education, obviously online courses and education that people like IBM can provide. Where we come into things is really helping mentor organizations to adopt these technologies and helping people collaborate on projects from a development perspective. But also, we talked about run and manage earlier as kind of concepts within a life cycle. So your teams that are responsible for operating these applications and systems also need to develop their skills and understand these technologies as well. So mentoring those individuals is key during the build phase, but also during the run/manage phase as well. And I think that's quite important for an organisation to adopt these technologies, because we've seen many IT projects where people haven't been brought on the journey, and more often than not they fail. Whereas if you get their buy-in, get their involvement, you've got a higher chance of success.
Doug, do you want to add anything to that?
I completely agree. I'm not sure I have much to add with what Chris has said. I think, organisation from a cultural perspective is probably the hardest challenge. I think technology is somewhat simpler, in my humble opinion. I think, people need to work closer together. They need to improve their comms. I think Chris, intimated and talked about that. And I think they need to ask for help. I think people are not good at asking for help. I think, skills that Deeper Than Blue have and experiences from other customers can help put in context the problem that you have and maybe come up with a solution that they'd never thought about before. So I think that's where sort of Deeper Than Blue can help. And I think, certainly that's where some of the cultural aspects and people working together aspects can start to, that experience can start to help those worlds and help shape those worlds.
There's a lot of knowledge, isn't there, Doug, and experience that our combined organisations have
without a doubt
gained through project delivery and engagements with clients. And really it's for clients and potential clients to lean in and use that knowledge and experience and dare I say accelerate again how they adopt these things and make sure their teams are proficient and become proficient.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. I think some of our clients don't lean on us, certainly IBM, anywhere near enough.
Yeah.
They could lean on us a lot more
Yeah.
and take advantage of some of the skills and experiences and practices from other places that we know. Yeah, and I think, again, to be blunt for a second, I think people are frightened because they think they're going to get sold to. And at the end of the day, it's their choice what they go buy, but they can certainly come to us for all the advice and help and guidance, and as part of a team here with IBM and Deeper Than Blue, I think that, as you said, Chris, that experience I think is second to none. We've done this many times.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
yeah.
Great. So, if you were advising an organisation starting its modernisation strategy tomorrow, what's the first step that you would insist on? And is there one trap that you'd recommend they avoid?
That's a good question. I think we've pointed to an area or something to avoid is don't delay the conversation. And as we touched on a minute ago, lean in on us, IBM, Deeper Than Blue, and ask the questions that sometimes you might be afraid to ask. Come and find out what that experience is, find out how the best in class do it. IBM has deployments and engagements globally. Deeper Than Blue has a number of clients where we have this technology running for over 5-6 years. And so we've had some learnings along that time, as will IBM. Come and understand what those are, understand where the pitfalls are, how to avoid them, but get on the journey would be my message.
Any traps to avoid?
Don't delay, right? Delay is the killer, is the absolute killer. Don't procrastinate. Maybe that's the better way to put it.
So the first step and the trap to avoid: don't delay.
Yep.
Yeah, same thing. Hey, look, I could get more specific and go, hey, look, I work with a lot of organizations that are looking at cloud as being maybe the target that they want to do, and they lift and shift and then think that they can optimize later. I think that's a trap that people fall into often. And I think there's some quick wins that they can gain from even just lift, right sizing, and then shift. And I think they miss that first step out. Whether you can then afford and prioritize a true modernization from the bottom of the layer to the top of the layer, as we spoke about at the beginning, right? That's for you to understand. But I try and avoid doing that, because I think there are things you can do to your advantage and start to gain some cost advantage and some productivity and efficiency advantages. So if you like, if I come back to the do and be more specific, do use the tooling to help you understand this thing. Do use the experience to help you prioritize, and think about how do you implement this stuff. And that goes back to what Chris said, is, go ask for help.
So I'm just going to emphasise, I think, what Doug said there in terms of it's an interesting one, isn't it? Don't lift and dump into the cloud.
Yeah, that's a good phrase.
It's about taking advantage of those cloud technologies. And we often see people just think that they've achieved, by bringing hypervisors, VM images into the cloud, they think they're doing cloud. But really, that's Basecamp. And they're not taking advantage of what the cloud can really bring to the party. And cloud-based technologies, whether you use those on-premise or in the public cloud. And that modernisation piece is where the benefits really start to come.
Okay, so just finally, looking 3 to 5 years ahead, how do you expect IBM's modernisation ecosystem and perhaps maybe the wider cloud landscape to evolve?
I certainly think this notion of hybrid is really important. I think many people are hybrid by accident today because they've moved workloads to various places, and all of a sudden they find that they have to go and manage an on-prem data center and then some cloud, a hyperscaler somewhere, and some SaaS product. So it's done by accident. Maybe is a bit harsh, but that's where they've fallen themselves in. I think going forward, I think there will be a predetermined hybrid strategy. They'll understand that they need to be able to look after these different places and different architectures, and therefore they'll start to adopt practices, procedures, and tooling to go help them to go do that. I can see that happening more and more. I think, hey, look, we've gone through nearly an hour without saying AI, or at least we haven't said it very many times. Okay, and in my contract, I have to talk about AI. Forgive me. I think AI is going to help start to automate some of those things where we've got tough problems and challenges to solve. Understanding my code base when I don't have the skills to go do that. Prioritizing and recommending approaches to be able to modernize those things, I think will come thick and fast in the tooling, and we're already seeing it today. We talked about how do we go and stand up infrastructure in a policy-based, secure fashion with infrastructure automation. I think that will become even more important as we go forward to be able to help us scale and get the economies of scale that we need to do, so we can start to then change the budget from maintenance and technical debt. I love the phrase, Chris, right? And move it to innovation. Okay, so we can start to think about how we can do different things. So for me, that's going to be important. Hybrid, I think, are going to be planned. I think, yes, more people adopt SaaS type software as they start to understand that they can do that, and it'll give them what they need for their business. So I can only see that shifting that way.
I agree. It's people are finding and developing maturity with the cloud type technologies and finding out what works and what doesn't work. And I think, as Doug said, they will have a better plan and view of what they want in the future. We've all witnessed in recent times some of the cloud hyperscalers having issues, and so that will be factored into their thinking as to whether they're multi-cloud and hybrid. And as we talked about earlier, people like IDC have already started to see some workloads come back off public cloud into on-premise. So it's about right-sizing, it's about rebalancing, it's about running workloads in the right place at the end of the day so that an organization can be commercially successful, innovate, and be agile.
That's great. I think we can probably draw this to a close now. So thank you for a fascinating chat. I've certainly learned a lot, and I hope our audience has too. If anyone does have any questions, if anyone wants to dig a bit deeper into this topic, the team at Deeper Than Blue are more than happy to have a chat, so get in touch with us. It just remains me to thank you all very much for your time.